Our own daughter-in-law pushed us off the cliff to silence us. My Jose P. and whispered pretend we're dead. I never thought I'd be telling this story, but some truths need to see daylight. I'm Rose Thompson, 72 years old, and for 35 years I worked as a high school principal in Clayton County, Georgia. My husband James and I saved every penny we could, built our dream ranch house, and planned to spend our golden years watching our grandchildren grow. But sometimes the people closest to you hide the darkest shadows. Before I tell you my story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. It started last summer, during what should have been a peaceful family gathering at our ranch. The magnolias were in full bloom, their sweet scent drifting through the evening air as we sat on the wraparound porch. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, had been acting strange for weeks. Little did I know she'd been methodically planning our demise. I noticed how she kept checking her phone that evening, her manicured nails tapping against the screen. My son Marcus was away on a business trip, and Patricia had been insisting on helping us manage our finances. "You've worked so hard," she'd say, her voice honey-sweet. "Let me handle the stress." Looking back, I should have seen the calculation behind those warm brown eyes. That night, she suggested we take a drive to see the sunset at Crowley's Cliff. James seemed hesitant. He'd always been better at reading people than me, but I dismissed his concerns. "What's wrong with watching the sunset with family?" I'd said. The words taste like ash in my mouth now. Do you ever get that feeling when something's not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it? Tell me in the comments if you've ever ignored your instincts and regretted it later. The drive was quiet, too quiet. Patricia sat in the back seat, still glued to her phone. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as we wound our way up the narrow road to the cliff. I remember the gravel crunching under the tires, the way the shadows stretched longer and darker. When we reached the lookout point, Patricia suggested we step out to take photos. James squeezed my hand, a warning I didn't understand until it was almost too late. We stood near the edge, admiring the view when I heard footsteps behind us. Quick, purposeful steps. The push came without warning. One moment we were standing, the next we were falling. But James, my brilliant James, pulled me close and whispered words that saved our lives. "Pretend we're dead." I wanted to scream as we tumbled, but something in his voice made me trust him completely. We landed on a narrow ledge 20 feet down, hidden from view above. Through my terror, I forced myself to lie still, barely breathing as Patricia's face appeared at the cliff's edge. But here's what she didn't know, what no one knew until now. James had discovered something in our financial records the day before, something that would expose not just Patricia, but a web of crimes that went far beyond our family. Want to know what James found? Share your theories in the comments below. We lay there, hearts pounding, as Patricia's footsteps faded away. The real question wasn't how we would survive the night on that ledge. It was how our own daughter-in-law could try to kill us. But sometimes, the answer to one mystery uncovers an even darker one. The night air grew bitter cold on that ledge. James and I clung to each other, barely daring to breathe as we heard Patricia's car engine start and fade into the distance. My whole body trembled, not just from the cold, but from the realization that our son's wife had just tried to murder us. If you've ever been betrayed by family, drop it in the comments. Sometimes sharing our pain helps us heal. "Rose," James whispered, his voice steady despite everything. "We need to stay here for at least an hour. She might come back to check." His hands, always so strong through 48 years of marriage, felt ice cold against mine. I nodded in the darkness, my mind racing through every interaction with Patricia over the past year. The ledge we'd landed on was barely wide enough for both of us to lie flat. Below us, the cliff dropped another 100 feet into darkness. Above, the stars began appearing one by one, mocking the peaceful evenings we'd spent stargazing from our porch. Every distant car sound made my heart jump. Was she coming back to finish what she'd started? While we waited, James told me what he'd discovered the previous day. He'd noticed something odd about our bank statements and decided to dig deeper. "Patricia hasn't just been helping with our finances," he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. She's been systematically draining our accounts, but that's not the worst part. I remember thinking, could this night get any worse? Oh, how naive that thought seems now. James pulled out his phone, thankfully unbroken in the fall, and showed me what he'd found. Patricia wasn't working alone. She was part of a network targeting elderly couples across 3 states. The scheme was elaborate: marry into families, gain trust, take control of finances, and then, well, we knew the last part now. But Marcus, I choked out, thinking of our son. Does he know? James's silence told me everything. That's when I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel above. We pressed ourselves against the cold rock face, hearts pounding. A car door slammed. Footsteps. Let me ask you, what would you do if you discovered someone you trusted was living a complete lie? Share your thoughts below. A beam of light swept over the cliff edge. They're not down there, a man's voice said, a voice that made my blood run cold. It was Marcus, our own son. They must have rolled further down, Patricia's voice replied. The darkness makes it hard to see. We'll come back at dawn to make sure. I had to stuff my fist in my mouth to keep from crying out. James's arm tightened around me, and I felt his tears falling on my shoulder. Our son, our only child, was part of this nightmare. The footsteps retreated. 2 car doors slammed this time, and the vehicles drove away. We waited another excruciating hour before James dared to use his phone's flashlight to examine our situation. The ledge connected to a narrow trail about 15 feet to our right, a trail we couldn't see in the darkness when we first landed. We need to get to the sheriff, James whispered. But not the local one. Patricia mentioned him in some of the emails I found. We don't know how deep this goes. Slowly, carefully, we crawled along the ledge to the trail. Every step was a battle against terror and exhaustion. By the time we reached the bottom of the cliff, my knees were bleeding through my pants, and James's breathing was labored. We couldn't go home, couldn't call anyone we knew. Our world had shrunk to just the 2 of us. There's a diner about 3 miles down the highway, James said. Open 24 hours, we can call the state police from there. As we walked through the darkness, I thought about all the signs we'd missed. The way Patricia had insisted on moving closer to us after the wedding, how she'd gradually isolated us from our friends, always with reasonable excuses. The frequent discussions about putting our ranch in a trust for tax purposes. Here's what keeps me up at night. If James hadn't found those emails, would anyone ever have known what really happened to us? How many other families had fallen victim to this scheme? But the biggest question, the one that made my heart ache with every step, how had we failed so badly as parents that our own son could do this? Want to know what we found at the diner that night? It's not what you might expect. Share your theories in the comments, and I'll continue with what happened next. The darkness ahead held more twists than either of us could have imagined. Sometimes survival means facing truths we're not ready to accept, and justice takes forms we never expected. The neon lights of Lucy's all-night diner cut through the darkness like a beacon. My legs were shaking, and James's limp had gotten worse during our 3-mile walk. The bell above the door chimed as we stumbled in at 2 a.m., probably looking like we'd crawled out of hell itself. Before I continue, if you're following this story, give it a like and subscribe. Every time you engage, it helps others find these important stories of survival. The night waitress, a young woman with kind eyes and faded blue hair, took one look at us and rushed over. Lord have mercy. Let me get you some water. Her name tag read Destiny. She didn't ask questions when we requested a booth far from the windows, just nodded and led us to the darkest corner of the empty diner. As I sipped the water with trembling hands, James pulled out his phone to call the state police. That's when we discovered the first piece of luck we'd had all night. He'd been automatically recording audio since we left the house, a habit he'd developed during his years as a civil rights attorney. We had Patricia's confession, Marcus's voice at the cliff, everything. Ma'am, Destiny approached our table again, her voice lowered. I don't mean to intrude, but are y'all the Thompsons, from the ranch on Cedar Creek Road? My heart nearly stopped. James's hand found mine under the table. Because if you are, she continued, glancing around the empty diner, you need to see something. What happened next would change everything we thought we knew about our situation. Have you ever had a complete stranger become your guardian angel? Share your story in the comments. Destiny disappeared into the back and returned with a worn leather journal. My grandmother worked for the county clerk's office before she passed last month. She kept records of things that didn't seem right. Your names are in here, along with about 20 other couples. The journal documented a pattern spanning 15 years. Elderly couples with substantial assets, mysterious accidents, properties transferred through a maze of shell companies. But the most shocking revelation wasn't about Patricia or Marcus. It was about who was really pulling the strings. James studied the pages with growing horror. Judge Reynolds, he whispered. The same judge who'd presided over countless estate cases in our county. The same man who'd been a dinner guest in our home. There's more, Destiny said, pulling up a chair. My grandmother started noticing that all these couples had children who'd suddenly moved back to the area after years away. All of them married spouses who worked in either legal services or financial planning. The pattern was clear now. They weren't just targeting wealthy elderly couples. They were recruiting their adult children first, manipulating them, corrupting them, turning them against their own parents. I thought about Marcus, about the little boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. How does a child go from that to planning his parents' murder? They must have something on him, I said, my voice breaking. Our Marcus wouldn't. James squeezed my hand. Rose, we need to face the possibility that Marcus made his choices. Destiny's next words chilled me to the bone. According to my grandmother's notes, there's a meeting happening tomorrow night. All the conspirators, including the judge. They gather every month at the old Mason Lodge outside town. Why are you helping us? James asked. Destiny's eyes welled up. Because my parents were on their list. The accident happened 3 months ago. Nobody would believe me when I said it wasn't natural causes. What would you do with information like this? Sometimes revenge and justice look very similar. Share your thoughts below. James was already forming a plan. We need to get this information to the FBI. But first, he looked at me, and I saw a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. First, we're going to that meeting. You can't, Destiny protested. They'll kill you. No, James said quietly. They think they already have. That's when headlights swept across the diner's parking lot, a police cruiser, moving slowly. The back door, Destiny whispered urgently. Through the kitchen. I'll stall them. As we slipped out into the night again, I heard the diner's bell chime and a familiar voice asking if anyone had seen 2 elderly people matching our description. Sheriff Cooper, one of Judge Reynolds' closest friends. The web was larger than we'd imagined, and we were running out of time. But sometimes, when you've lost everything, you find strength you never knew you had. Want to know how we turned the tables on them? The next part of this story shows exactly why you should never underestimate a mother's determination, even when her own child has betrayed her. Destiny's grandmother had been thorough. The journal included a service tunnel map of the old Mason Lodge, a relic from Prohibition days. As we huddled in the back of Destiny's car, speeding down dark country roads, I studied those yellowed pages while trying to process the weight of what we were planning. For those just joining this story, take a moment to like and subscribe. The next few minutes will show you why you should never write off the elderly. We've got more fight in us than you'd expect. We spent the rest of that night at Destiny's small apartment above the local florist shop. She'd converted her grandmother's study into a makeshift investigation room, with photos and documents covering one entire wall. Looking at it, I felt sick. There were dozens of victims, some we'd known, some we'd even attended their funerals. How did we miss this? I whispered, staring at a photo of the Hendersons, a lovely couple who'd supposedly died in a house fire last year. Their son had moved back to town 6 months before, with his new wife who worked at the county clerk's office. James was copying essential pages from the journal. Because they're patient, Rose, they groom these families for months, sometimes years, and they're careful about spacing out the accidents. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed something wrong but talked yourself out of speaking up? Drop a faux in the comments if you have. Sometimes our silence is their greatest weapon. Around dawn, James laid out our plan. The monthly meeting was set for 9 p.m. that night. According to Destiny's information, everyone would be there. Judge Reynolds, the corrupt sheriff, Patricia, Marcus, and at least a dozen other conspirators. They gathered to divide their spoils and plan their next targets. But we have something they don't expect, James said, holding up his phone with the recorded confession. And now we have proof of the larger conspiracy. I looked at my husband of nearly 5 decades, seeing the strategic mind that had won so many civil rights cases. They think we're dead, I said slowly, understanding where he was going with this. Exactly. And the dead can't testify until they do. Destiny helped us prepare. She brought us clean clothes from the thrift store where her sister worked. James used her laptop to upload the audio files to multiple secure locations. I studied the tunnel maps until I could draw them from memory. But as the hour approached, I couldn't shake the image of Marcus as a child, holding my hand on his first day of school. What happened to our boy James? I've been thinking about that, he said quietly. Remember when Marcus lost that scholarship senior year, when he had to drop out of law school? I nodded. It had been devastating for him. Well, I found something in those emails. Judge Reynolds' firm offered to pay off Marcus's student loans 5 years ago. That's when it started. They prey on desperation, turn it into greed. What would you do if you discovered your child had been manipulated into becoming someone you don't recognize? Share your thoughts below. At 8:30 p.m., we parked a block from the Mason Lodge. The old building looked innocent enough, its brick facade glowing amber in the streetlights. Cars began arriving, expensive ones. I recognized Patricia's Mercedes, then felt my heart clench as Marcus's BMW pulled in behind it. Ready? James whispered. We used the service tunnel entrance, just as the map showed. The musty underground passage led us to a ventilation shaft directly above the main meeting room. Through the grating, we could see everything. Judge Reynolds stood at the head of a long table, looking every bit the respected community leader in his tailored suit. First order of business, he announced. Congratulations to Patricia and Marcus Thompson on completing their assignment. The ranch property will be transferred to our holding company by week's end. Patricia beamed while Marcus stared at his hands. I noticed he looked pale, almost ill. Now, about the Mitchell property, the judge continued. Their daughter Sarah's background check is complete. Henderson, your wife has already made contact at their church group. A young man nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. Sarah's vulnerable, recent divorce, underwater mortgage. She'll be easy to turn. That's when I saw something that changed everything. While everyone focused on the judge, Marcus quietly slipped something from his pocket and placed it under the table. A small black device with a blinking light. James saw it too. A recording device, he breathed. Could it be? Had our son been working against them from the inside? Or was this another layer of deception? The answer would have to wait, because at that moment, Sheriff Cooper burst into the room. We've got a problem, he announced. The Thompson bodies, they're not at the bottom of the cliff. And their phone just pinged near here. Chaos erupted, but amid the shouting and accusations, I saw Marcus press something on his phone. Suddenly, every device in the room, phones, tablets, laptops, lit up with the same message. FBI evidence transfer complete. Want to know what happened next? Let's just say that sometimes the greatest act of courage is admitting you've been wrong, and sometimes the path to redemption starts with a fall. The room below us exploded into panic. Judge Reynolds' composed facade cracked as he started barking orders. Find them, and somebody trace that data transfer. Through the chaos, I watched Marcus. While others rushed for exits, he remained eerily still, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Almost exactly where we were hidden. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. If you're invested in this story, hit that like button. The truth about Marcus will surprise you. It's too late, Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. Everything's been uploaded to multiple secure servers. 5 years of evidence, including tonight's meeting. Patricia whirled on him, her designer heels scraping the hardwood floor. What did you do? The honey was gone from her voice, replaced by venom. What I should have done years ago, Marcus replied. He stood slowly, pulling an FBI badge from his jacket pocket. We've been building this case since you first approached me about my parents. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Reynolds recovered first, his laugh sharp and cold. "You really think anyone will believe you? A son who helped push his own parents off a cliff. You're as guilty as the rest of us." "Am I?" Marcus pressed something on his phone again. His voice filled the room, played back from a recording. "I need more time. If we move against my parents now, we'll lose our shot at the whole organization." Another voice, a woman's, responded. "Your handler agrees. Stay in position. But Marcus, if anything happens to your parents, I won't let it," recorded Marcus promised. "I've got a backup plan." Present Marcus looked directly up at the ventilation shaft. "You can come down now, Mom, Dad. It's over. Have you ever misjudged someone completely? Sheriff, if you have." James squeezed my hand. "Our boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He was protecting us the whole time." But before we could move, Patricia lunged for her purse. The metallic gleam of a pistol caught the light. "Nobody's going anywhere," she snarled. What happened next moved so fast. I'm still piecing it together. Marcus tackled Patricia, just as she fired. The bullet hit the ceiling inches from our hiding spot. Sheriff Cooper drew his weapon, but instead of aiming at Marcus, he pointed it at Judge Reynolds. "FBI, everybody down." The sheriff's badge hit the table as he pulled out another, a federal one. Through the grating, I watched years of carefully constructed criminal empire crumble in minutes. As FBI agents flooded the room, Marcus looked up again. "I'm so sorry, Mom, Dad. I couldn't tell you. We knew they had people everywhere watching everything. Your reactions had to be genuine." James and I made our way down through a side entrance, helped by agents who'd been waiting for this moment. When Marcus saw us, he broke protocol and ran to us, pulling us both into a fierce hug. "When did you know?" I asked him, holding my boy tight. "About Patricia?" "The day she approached me about helping with your finances. Her story didn't add up, so I contacted the FBI. They'd been tracking similar cases across 3 states. We just couldn't prove the connection to Judge Reynolds." "But the cliff," James started. "I had agents hidden nearby. If anything went wrong, they would have intervened. But you two," Marcus shook his head, managing a wet laugh. "You saved yourselves, played dead, and gave us everything we needed on recording." As we watched Patricia and Judge Reynolds being led away in handcuffs, I thought about trust, betrayal, and redemption. About how sometimes the deepest love shows itself in the hardest choices. Tell me in the comments. Could you have done what Marcus did? Pretend to be part of a criminal conspiracy for years, unable to tell your own parents the truth, all to protect them and bring down something bigger? But this isn't the end of our story. What happened next would test our family in ways we never imagined. Because sometimes, bringing down one evil only reveals another, deeper darkness waiting beneath. The aftermath of that night at the Mason Lodge should have been our happy ending. Instead, it was just the beginning of an even darker chapter. As we sat in the FBI's safe house the next morning, Marcus revealed why he couldn't celebrate yet. If you're just joining this story, take a moment to subscribe. What I'm about to share might save someone you love. Judge Reynolds isn't the top, Marcus explained, his hands wrapped around a cold coffee cup. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. He's just one node in a network that spans the entire Southeast. They call themselves the Heritage Coalition. The FBI agent in charge, a stern woman named Director Chen, spread photos across the table, faces I recognized, bank presidents, politicians, even a few televangelists. They target communities with high concentrations of elderly wealth, she explained, particularly in historically black areas where generational wealth is just starting to accumulate. My stomach turned as I recognized more faces. People who'd served on charity boards with me, who'd attended our church. How deep does this go? Have you ever discovered that evil wasn't just one person, but an entire system? Drop a salon in the comments if you've faced something similar. Marcus pulled out a laptop. "Watch this," he said, pulling up security footage from what looked like an exclusive country club. This was taken 3 months ago. The video showed Judge Reynolds meeting with a distinguished-looking man I'd seen on national news. Senator Howard Blake, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. They were laughing, sharing drinks, and looking at photos of properties I recognized. Properties that belonged to victims. The Heritage Coalition isn't just about stealing from elderly couples, Marcus continued. They're systematically destroying Black generational wealth across multiple states. Every time a family manages to build something, they swoop in. They've got judges, politicians, bankers, all working together. James leaned forward. But why target us specifically? We're not the wealthiest family in the county. Marcus's face darkened. Because of you, Dad. Your civil rights cases in the 70s and 80s. The coalition keeps a list of disruptive influences, families who've historically fought against systemic racism. You were on their priority target list. The irony wasn't lost on me. My husband had spent his career fighting for justice, only to have that same work make us targets. Director Chen interjected. That's why we needed Marcus deep undercover. The coalition doesn't just recruit anyone. They specifically look for children of their targets. It's not just about the money. It's about breaking the will of communities to fight back. Would you risk everything to bring down a system of evil? Share your thoughts below. But the real shock came when Marcus showed us the next piece of evidence. Patricia wasn't just any recruit. She was Senator Blake's niece. Her marriage to Marcus had been planned years in advance. She was supposed to be my handler, Marcus said quietly. Make sure I stayed loyal to the coalition. What she didn't know was that I was already working with the FBI when she approached me. James took my hand. Son, the risk you took. I had no choice. Marcus cut in. When I discovered what they were planning for you and Mom, his voice broke. But we're not done. The evidence we gathered last night is just the beginning. Senator Blake is holding a private fundraiser next week at his estate. Every major player in the coalition will be there. Director Chen nodded. And thanks to Judge Reynolds' arrest, we now have a way in. But, she looked at me and James. We need your help. Our help? I asked. The coalition thinks you're dead. That gives us an advantage. We need you to stay dead for a little longer, and then make a very public resurrection at exactly the right moment. The plan she outlined was audacious, dangerous, and possibly our only chance to tear down this corrupt system once and for all. Want to know what role two supposedly dead grandparents would play in bringing down a national conspiracy? Share your theories in the comments. As we discussed the details, I couldn't help but think about all the families who'd lost everything to these people, about the communities that had worked so hard to build something, only to have it stolen through this elaborate web of deceit. I have one condition, I said finally. Everyone looked at me. When this is over, I want to help the other families, the ones who lost loved ones to these monsters. They deserve to know the truth. Marcus smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in years. Actually, Mom, that's already part of the plan. But first, he pulled out another file. Let me tell you about Senator Blake's biggest secret and why he's so desperate to keep it hidden. The next 3 days felt like living in a spy novel. Director Chen moved us to a different safe house each night, while Marcus briefed us on Senator Blake's operation. But it was what he revealed about Patricia that truly chilled me to the bone. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button if you want to know how deep this conspiracy goes. Trust me, it gets worse. Patricia wasn't just carrying out orders, Marcus explained, spreading surveillance photos across the table. She was training their next generation of operators. The photos showed her meeting with young, well-dressed men and women at expensive restaurants. They called it the Legacy Program. James studied the photos. They're all about Marcus's age. All children of their potential targets, Director Chen confirmed. They identify wealthy families with adult children who are struggling, student loans, failed businesses, divorces. Then they offer a way out. Remember to comment below if you've ever been approached by someone offering help that seemed too good to be true. I picked up one photo that made my blood run cold. Patricia at a coffee shop with Sarah Mitchell, Reverend Mitchell's daughter. The same Reverend Mitchell who'd been my friend for 30 years, whose wife had recently passed. They're already moving on their next targets, I whispered. Marcus nodded grimly. But here's what makes Senator Blake's operation different from regular elder fraud schemes. They don't just want the money, They want to systematically dismantle any black family that's built generational wealth or community influence. He pulled out a document marked Legacy Protocol. It detailed how they groomed their recruits, teaching them to target their own parents' assets, while identifying other potential victims in their social circles. It's like a pyramid scheme of evil, James muttered. Director Chen tapped her tablet. Senator Blake's fundraiser is in 4 days. The entire Legacy program leadership will be there, including their newest recruits. They're planning to announce an expansion into 3 more states. But that's where we have an advantage, Marcus said, pulling out blueprints of Blake's estate. They think Mom and Dad are dead. They think I'm one of them, and, he smiled slightly, they don't know about our secret weapon. Which is? I asked. Reverend Mitchell's daughter, Sarah. She's been working with us for months. My jaw dropped. Sarah's an FBI agent. No, Marcus replied. Better. She's a forensic accountant who's been tracking the coalition's money for years. When they approached her, she came to us immediately. Tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to go undercover against an organization this powerful? The plan was intricate. Sarah had convinced Patricia. She was eager to join the Legacy program. At the fundraiser, she would be formally introduced to Senator Blake, along with other new recruits. What they didn't know was that Sarah had developed a program that could trace and document every transaction in their network. But we need something more dramatic than just financial records, Director Chen said. We need to expose their true nature in a way the public can't ignore. That's when James spoke up. What if the dead came back to life? All eyes turned to him. Think about it, he continued. They're gathering to celebrate their success, including Patricia's supposed triumph in eliminating us. What if we walked in at that exact moment? Marcus leaned forward. With every major player present, all their new recruits watching, and Sarah's program running in the background, documenting everything, Director Chen finished. It could work, but it's incredibly dangerous. I thought about all the families who'd lost loved ones to this scheme, about communities stripped of their hard-earned legacy. Sometimes, I said quietly, the most dangerous thing is staying silent. But as we finalized the details, Marcus received a text that changed everything. His face went pale as he read it. Patricia knows, he said, looking up. Someone tipped her off. She's moving up their timeline. The fundraiser isn't in 4 days. It's tomorrow night. Director Chen immediately started making calls. James pulled out the blueprints again. But all I could think about was Patricia's face when she pushed us off that cliff, the cold satisfaction in her eyes. Now we had less than 24 hours to prepare. Less than 24 hours to get ready to face not just Patricia and Senator Blake, but an entire room full of people who'd made destroying families their life's work. Want to know how we pulled off the impossible with no time to prepare? Drop a there in the comments, if you're ready for what happens next. Because sometimes when your back is against the wall you find strength you never knew you had, and sometimes justice comes with a side of poetic revenge that even the devil himself wouldn't see coming. The next 18 hours were a blur of preparation. Director Chen's team worked through the night, adjusting plans and coordinating with Sarah. But at 6 p.m. the following evening, as I sat in the back of a catering van heading toward Senator Blake's estate, doubt crept in. If this story has taught you anything so far, drop it in the comments. Sometimes the scariest truths hide in plain sight. Everyone clear on their positions? Marcus's voice crackled through our hidden earpieces. He was already inside, playing his role as Patricia's dutiful husband. James squeezed my hand. We were dressed as serving staff, our faces subtly altered with makeup, to avoid immediate recognition. Sarah had gotten us on the catering list, but one wrong move would blow everything. The estate was a sprawling Georgian mansion, all white columns and manicured lawns. As we unloaded trays of hors d'oeuvres, I watched luxury cars arrive. Each one carried someone who'd either participated in or benefited from the destruction of countless families. Target confirmed. Sarah's voice came through our earpieces. Patricia just arrived with the new recruits. They're heading to the library for the private briefing. Director Chen's voice followed. Remember, we need them to explicitly discuss their operation. The recordings have to be undeniable. I moved through the growing crowd with my tray, catching snippets of conversation that made my skin crawl. The Thompson property closes next week. Did you see the list of potential targets for Q4? My daughter's working on a promising lead in Charleston. They discussed destroying lives the way others might discuss golf scores. Have you ever been in a room full of enemies who didn't know they were looking right at you? Share your experience below. At 7:30, Senator Blake called the main group into the ballroom, but the real meeting was happening in the library. Through my earpiece, I heard Sarah introducing the new recruits to Patricia. You've all taken the first step toward securing your futures. Patricia's voice oozed false warmth. The legacy program isn't just about financial opportunity. It's about reshaping the economic landscape. James and I exchanged glances. We were positioned in the service corridor behind the library, waiting for our cue. Senator Blake will be joining us shortly, Patricia continued. But first, I want to share a success story, the Thompson elimination. My heart pounded as she described pushing us off the cliff. The pride in her voice made me physically ill. The property transfer completes next week, she explained. Their death not only secured significant assets, but removed a long-standing obstacle to our community redesign project. What about the son? A new recruit asked. Isn't it difficult to... Marcus understands sacrifice for the greater good. Patricia cut in. Don't worry. We have ways of ensuring loyalty. That's when Sarah made her move. You mean like the insurance policy you have on all legacy members? The room went silent. Excuse me? Patricia's voice turned sharp. The life insurance policies, Sarah continued calmly. The ones taken out on every legacy member's spouse and children. Insurance that pays out to the coalition if any member betrays the organization. I heard Patricia's heels click across the floor. Who told you about that? The same person who told me about Judge Reynolds' arrest, and the encrypted servers, and Project Inheritance. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You're working with them, Patricia whispered. You're wired. No, Sarah replied. I'm just better at finding information than you are at hiding it. Did you really think you could keep this hidden forever? The sound of a slap echoed through our earpieces, followed by a scuffle. Now, Director Chen commanded. James and I burst through the service door, just as Senator Blake entered through the main library doors. The look on Patricia's face, her hand still raised from striking Sarah, was one I'll never forget. Impossible, she breathed. Actually, I said, straightening my back, just improbable, like the chances of two elderly people surviving a fall that was supposed to kill them. The new recruits started backing away as FBI agents emerged from their positions, but Senator Blake merely smiled. Rose and James Thompson, he said smoothly. I must admit I'm impressed, but you should have stayed dead. He reached into his jacket, but Marcus was faster. In one fluid motion, my son had the senator pinned to the antique desk. Security teams are on their way, Blake spat. You mean the ones we replaced with federal agents 3 hours ago? Director Chen stepped out from behind a bookcase. Or the private contractors who are currently being arrested at their headquarters. Want to know what we found in Senator Blake's private safe? Drop a in the comments. Some secrets are worth waiting for. But as the arrests began, I noticed something strange. Patricia was smiling, not the desperate smile of someone caught, but the confident smirk of someone with one. The next few seconds moved in slow motion. As Patricia's finger left her phone, every electronic device in the room started pinging simultaneously, but instead of the explosion or security breach we expected, something else happened entirely. Before I continue, hit subscribe if you want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes. Sometimes the biggest threats aren't what you expect. Message sent to all coalition contacts. Patricia announced triumphantly. Every record, every account, every trace. Gone. Good luck proving anything now. But her smile faltered when Marcus started laughing. What's so funny? She snapped. You just activated exactly what we wanted, he said. That dead man's switch. We reprogrammed it this morning. Instead of erasing evidence, you just sent every coalition transaction record to every major news outlet in the country. Have you ever seen someone realize they've been outplayed at their own game? Share in the comments. Patricia, lunged for her phone, but Sarah was quicker. Looking for this, she held up a small USB drive. The original Switch program, I swapped it hours ago. Amazing what people leave unattended in their purses during lunch. But Senator Blake remained unnaturally calm. You think this ends with us? The coalition has branches in every major city. You've exposed one node, nothing more. That's when James stepped forward, and I saw the lawyer in him emerge, the man who'd taken on systemic racism in the courts decades ago. Actually, Senator, we found your private ledger. The one you keep in that safe behind the Rembrandt. James nodded toward the painting. Your personal insurance policy against your own partners. Detailed records of every branch, every operator, every transaction, including the offshore accounts. The senator's composure cracked. That's impossible. The combination changes weekly. I finished for him, based on your late wife's birthday. Some patterns are easy to spot when you've spent a lifetime watching people hide things. Director Chen nodded to her agents, who moved to the painting. Mrs. Thompson has been quite helpful in understanding how you think, Senator. Apparently you use the same pattern for your computer passwords, which is how we access the real coalition database. The room erupted into chaos. Several of the new recruits tried to run, only to find FBI agents at every exit. Patricia made a desperate grab for Sarah, but Marcus intercepted her, pinning her arms behind her back. You don't understand what you've done, Patricia hissed at him. The coalition isn't just an organization. It's a necessity. These communities, they're not ready for real wealth. We provide order. Marcus tightened his grip. No, you provide systematic destruction of Black generational wealth, and it ends today. But as agents led Patricia away, she called back over her shoulder. Ask your mother about Project Reclamation. Ask her what really happened in 1985. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Mom. Marcus looked confused. What's she talking about? I felt James stiffen beside me. We'd never told Marcus about that year, about what we'd discovered and been forced to bury. Tell me in the comments, should some secrets stay buried even if they could help expose greater truths? It's not just about the money, I said slowly. The coalition, it grew out of something older. Something that started when communities like ours first began to build real wealth after desegregation. Director Chen stepped closer. Mrs. Thompson, what do you know? I looked at James, who nodded slightly. In 1985, your father and I found evidence of a systematic program to undermine Black-owned banks and businesses. We tried to expose it, but 3 weeks later our house was burned down. James finished. With all the evidence inside, we got the message and backed off. Marcus ran a hand over his face. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because they made it clear next time it wouldn't be just our house, I said quietly. And you were only 5 years old. Sarah, who'd been examining Patricia's phone, suddenly spoke up. Everyone, you need to see this. Project Reclamation isn't just history. According to these files, it's active, and it's scheduled for implementation in 12 cities next month. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The coalition wasn't just stealing from individual families, they were preparing for something much bigger. Want to know what we found in those files? Sometimes the past doesn't just haunt us, it comes back with reinforcements. The FBI's command center hummed with activity as Sarah projected the Project Reclamation files onto a wall screen. My hands trembled as I recognized names and places from our past, pieces of a puzzle we'd glimpsed decades ago, now finally forming a complete picture. If you're still with us, drop in the comments. The truth about generational wealth theft is bigger than anyone imagined. Project Reclamation isn't just about stealing property, Sarah explained, scrolling through documents. It's a coordinated effort to reverse every economic gain made by Black communities since the Civil Rights Movement. Marcus stood beside me, his face hardening as he read. They've mapped every Black-owned bank, every successful business, every piece of generational property in 12 major cities. They're not just targeting individuals anymore, they're planning a simultaneous takeover. Through seemingly legitimate means, James added, his attorney's mind picking apart the strategy. Bank foreclosures, eminent domain claims, sudden environmental concerns requiring property seizures. Director Chen pointed to a timeline. They're moving in 30 days. Each city has a designated team of coalition members embedded in local government, banking, and real estate. Tell me, have you ever noticed patterns of businesses or homes in your community suddenly changing hands? Share your observations below. My eyes fixed on a familiar name in the files. Robert Freeman. That's impossible, I whispered. He died in the fire, 1985. Who is Robert Freeman? Sarah asked. James gripped my hand. He was our contact at the Federal Banking Commission. He's the one who first showed us evidence of coordinated discrimination against black-owned banks the night before our house burned down. He was found in his car, I finished. They called it an accident. Marcus pulled up Freeman's file. Not dead. He's listed as a current coalition advisor, codename Phoenix. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The man who'd supposedly died trying to help us had been working for them all along. The fire that destroyed our evidence hadn't been a warning. It had been a cover-up. Look at this, Sarah said suddenly. She'd been digging deeper into Patricia's phone, regular payments from offshore accounts to someone called the historian, regular meetings at the Old North Church. I cut in. Everyone turned to me. It's where we used to meet Freeman, where he showed us the original documents. Director Chen was already mobilizing a team. That church has been abandoned for years. Perfect meeting spot. Wait, Marcus said. Tomorrow night, there's a scheduled meeting. All the project reclamation city coordinators plus someone listed as original architect. James straightened. After 40 years, we might finally learn who was really behind it all. But as agents prepared for the operation, Sarah made another discovery that changed everything. These property seizures, they're not the end goal. Look at the Phase 2 plans. The room fell silent as she pulled up more documents. Maps of planned economic rehabilitation zones, lists of pre-approved developers, a complete blueprint for erasing entire communities and replacing them with luxury developments. They're not just stealing property, Marcus said quietly. They're trying to erase our history, our presence, our very existence in these cities. Want to know what role Robert Freeman, the man who faked his death, plays in all this? Sometimes the biggest betrayals come from those who pretend to be allies. Director Chen laid out the plan. We would infiltrate the church meeting the next night. With coalition leadership focused on the arrests at Senator Blake's estate, they'd be desperate to salvage their operation. But there's something else, Sarah said hesitantly. She pulled up one final document. According to this, Project Reclamation has a failsafe. If the operation is exposed, they're prepared to crash the entire banking system in these 12 cities. They've been placing sleeper code in banking software for years. By economic mutual destruction, James muttered. They're betting we won't risk it. I thought about all the families who'd lost everything to these people. About Robert Freeman's betrayal. About the communities that would be destroyed if Project Reclamation succeeded. They don't know what we're willing to risk, I said. They never have. But as we finalized our plans, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Something about the church meetings, about Freeman's survival, about the timing of it all. The Old North Church loomed against the night sky, its abandoned facade masking secrets 4 decades in the making. As James and I approached through the shadows, I couldn't help but remember the last time we'd walked these steps, young, idealistic, and unaware of the price of truth. If you followed this journey from the beginning, drop a sullen below. Some lights refused to be extinguished. In position, Marcus's voice whispered through our earpieces. He and Sarah had entered through the basement, while FBI teams surrounded the building. Through the clouded windows, we could see flickering lights, not electric, but candles. Just like 40 years ago. James squeezed my hand as we slipped through the side door. The scene inside froze my blood. Seated in a semicircle were 12 people, the city coordinators for Project Reclamation, and at the center, standing near the old pulpit, was Robert Freeman. He'd aged, but those eyes, those same deceptive eyes that had once promised to help us expose the truth. Ah, Freeman smiled, not looking surprised at all. The prodigal Thompson's return, right on schedule. The coordinators turned, some reaching for weapons, but Freeman raised his hand. No need, they're expected. Have you ever realized you'd walked into a trap, but walked forward anyway? Share your moment of calculated risk below. You knew we were coming, James said. It wasn't a question. Of course, Patricia's arrest, the exposed files, all part of the plan. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a few pieces to win the game. Freeman's smile widened. Did you really think you were the only ones who could plant false information? Sarah's voice crackled in our earpieces. The banking codes, they're not a fail-safe. They're bait. They wanted us to find them. But before we could react, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows behind the pulpit. My heart stopped. Judge Reynolds. But you're in custody, I stammered. A convincing double, he smirked. The real work happens in the shadows, Rose. Always has. Why do you think we let Marcus play FBI informant for so long? Marcus burst through the basement door, gun raised, Sarah beside him. Because you needed us to expose the surface operation, he said, to make everyone think the threat was eliminated. While the real Project Reclamation continues underground, Freeman nodded. Exactly. The coalition was always meant to be discovered eventually. It's what comes next that matters. The historian, I whispered, finally understanding. That's what you've been all along, isn't it, Robert? Recording our mistakes, our patterns, our weaknesses. Learning how to dismantle communities from the inside out, he confirmed. The coalition was crude, direct theft and violence. The new approach is much more subtle. James took a step forward. The banking codes aren't for crashing the system. They're for slowly bleeding it dry. Generation by generation, Judge Reynolds added. No dramatic seizures, no suspicious accidents, just the quiet erosion of wealth, opportunity, and hope. By the time people realize what's happening, it'll be too late, Freeman finished. Tell me in the comments, how do you fight an enemy that uses time itself as a weapon? But something wasn't right. Freeman's confidence, the staged confrontation. Why let us discover all this? Then I saw it, the small red lights blinking in the shadows. Cameras. You're recording this, I said. You want to be caught. Freeman actually applauded. Finally. You see, the best way to demoralize a community is to let them discover the truth and realize they're powerless to stop it. Tonight's confession will be released in 5 years, long after the real damage is done. Imagine the impact, learning that even when you expose the conspiracy, you still can't win. But he'd made one crucial mistake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device, the original one from James's phone, the night Patricia pushed us off the cliff. You forgot who taught me about keeping records, Robert. That night in 1985, I wasn't just a naive activist. I was a school principal who'd spent 20 years watching people hide their true nature. The device lit up, connecting to every screen in the church. Phones, tablets, laptops. Decades of hidden files, real account numbers, actual names, and operations began streaming to every law enforcement agency and news outlet in the country. The thing about being underestimated, I said as FBI teams flooded in, is that people tell you their real plans. They let you see their real faces, and they never expect you to have your own historian. Freeman's mask finally cracked as he realized, while he'd been studying us all these years, we'd been studying him right back. As agents led them away, Judge Reynolds called back. It won't matter. The system is too big, too entrenched. Maybe, James replied, but sunlight has a way of changing things, and this time the whole world is watching. In the end, it wasn't just about saving our family or exposing one conspiracy. It was about breaking a cycle that had repeated for generations, about proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon against systematic oppression is the simple act of refusing to stay silent. The Old North Church stands empty now, but its walls hold new truths, and in communities across the country, people are finally seeing the invisible hands that tried to shape their fate. As for us, well, every Sunday, I host a different family for dinner, families who've lost loved ones to the coalition's schemes. We share stories, resources, and hope. Because sometimes the best revenge is building something stronger than what they tried to destroy. Remember, if you followed this story, don't just like and subscribe. Share it, because somewhere, someone needs to know they're not alone in their fight. And as for Patricia, she finally learned what real justice looks like, but that's another story for another time.